Hey guys, welcome. I'm so glad you made it. So in this video, we're just going to be talking about how to edit on your iPhone. This is not going to dive into anything too crazy, too fancy, nothing that is overcomplicated. In this, it's just going to be all on your iPhone through the native app. When you take a picture and you're looking at it, you can hit the edit button and just start going crazy with it. So that's what we're going to be discussing this video today. The first we're going to go over is kind of the lighting, how can you change your camera's lighting within the editing process? The second thing we're going to go over is color. How are you going to make that color pop? What are you going to want to do to make that color look natural and crisp? And thirdly, we're going to go over the just details of the picture, just making sure that everything, you get the depth into the field of views, everything like that, just all the detail that you'd like in your picture. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to share the screen onto my iPhone. Okay, so here we are. So this is the before and after of this iPhone photo here. As you can see, you're just going to notice there's a lot more color, a lot more detail, and just the lighting itself, it looks a lot more clear. So we're going to go over how to do this on your phone. Later, I'm going to link I'm going to put a link down there in the description where you can actually go and download these photos, and you can actually start using these as kind of a template, and you can start messing with them yourself. So despite whatever platform you're using, I'm going to create a way for you to use these photos and just be able to go through everything and edit them yourself. If you want to, go and edit your own photos as we're doing this. But I thought it'd be nice to provide you guys with my own pictures that I did that I'm going to be editing right here in front of you so you can follow along and see how it works. Okay, first up, we have this picture, which I genuinely enjoyed this picture. It was a nice and fun one to take. But as you can see, there's definitely lots of room for improvement here. So we're going to hop into edit. After you do that, the first thing you're going to see is exposure. That is this plus and minus sign right here. So this is something that iPhone's genuinely pretty good at getting, is the exposure. However, on this, you can see if we darken it a little bit, we're going to see a little more detail in those clouds. So let's go ahead and let's take it down to -20. Brilliance, you always want to increase your brilliance. As you can see, that's going to start taking out more detail in the very foreground of it. You're going to see these trees and the leaves start lighting up. You're going to start seeing a little bit of color, but most importantly, the light's going to be coming down there, and you just kind of have a spotlight on those leaves and trees. Third is highlights. So here, we like to decrease our highlights. That's just going to increase a little more detail into the sky. So you're just going to start seeing these subtle things like these clouds start coming through a little bit better. On here, the details in the clouds aren't going to be spectacular due to that day, the clouds all kind of looked similar. They all kind of meshed together. It was all just gray clouds. No like really sharp formation in the clouds, you could say. Just kind of a flat sheet of clouds. So then we're going to hop into shadows. Now, shadows is something that I actually like to increase how much shadow there is, which is going to be going down. So there's a point where it just hits a tipping point. As you can see right here, it's about 20. Go from 20 to 25. Well, -25 in there, and you're just going to see more shadows be cast into the photo. It's going to mainly kind of naturally saturate the photo instead of you having to go into saturation later and up that way too high that it all looks over processed. Then you're going to go into your contrast. So here in contrast, you always up the contrast, not by too much. We're going to go with 22 because it's a low number where it looks good. If you go way too high, as you can see, that's just going to way overdo it to the photo. You're going to see way too much detail in the rock. It's not going to look very real. And then the trees are all getting blacked out, the leaves as well. But we go down to like the 22 range, and it's actually looking pretty good. The trees aren't too dark. And we can always fix that later here in brightness. So we're going to up the brightness by maybe up to 8, I would say. From there, let's up the black point a little bit, not too much, like a 6 for the black point. Okay, so now we're going to get into color. I mean, we did just kind of dip into color with the black point. However, I still associate that with lighting. However, that's going to, because that's going to affect kind of the shadowy areas. But now we're going to hop into color. So saturations first. If we start upping the saturation, we can see like 50, 60, 70, like 80, way, way, way oversaturated. Start knocking that down to maybe 20, 21, 20. It's looking pretty good, still a little overdone. I want to say let's knock it down to like a 10. Because then we're going to hop into Vibrance and we're going to knock up Vibrance a little bit. We're going to put Vibrance out 10 as well. So if you want to, pause for a second and look at where you come from. Just going to click on the original and then it's going to go to the edited. So already you can see major improvements. Now the warmth is the next thing we're going to go into. Now this time, what we want to do is we're going to assess the picture where it's at. This is something I kind of like to toggle back and forth. Because sometimes you make it a little too warm, it's going to look, and then of course you make it too cold, everything's going to turn green. So right over here, I feel like what needs to happen is let's bring it down to like a -5, I feel. Take a look 1 second. Let's see. Actually, let's go +5. So the warmth is something that's a little harder to distinguish between, because on one side, in this picture alone, you want these yellow and orange leaves to pop really well, and they pop really well in warmer colors. However, on the other side, you also want these green trees to pop as well. They're going to pop better under cooler colors. So if we up the warmth a little bit, because I think these yellow leaves, the yellow and orange leaves need a little help popping out a little bit more. And then on the other side, the green, it looks fine so far. And in fact, we can go into tint and we can give it a tint over here to the left, which is actually going to bring in that blue, that bluish color, and give those green trees a little more pop as well. Now, lastly, we're going to go over details. So this is where also it gets a little tricky. Sharpness is something that I never up on my iPhone photos. The iPhone is actually extremely sharp. In fact, it's a little too sharp. When I'm editing in Adobe, when I'm editing in Lightroom, I actually like to bring my sharpness down so that it doesn't look way overly sharp. I like to feather it down a little bit. So on an iPhone, when we're editing here, we're just going to leave it alone. Not something we need to worry about right now. Now, definition is something that I like to add it just because I feel like it gives a little more depth into it. So we're going to add a little bit of it, not too much, maybe like 15. Next thing is noise reduction here. It's not a terribly dark photo. There's not too much noise to worry about. It's also pretty good quality. There is a little bit of noise in the sky as we zoom into here. So if we did want to give it a little touch up, we could probably bring this up to like maybe a 25. And as you can see, that's just going to make it a little easier on the eyes when you zoom back out. And then it's just going to keep kind of the detail there within the photo without overly having noise up there and having it be visible. This is just going to tone it down a little bit. Then the next thing you have right here is whether you want to kind of highlight it with a white edges or black. Now in this picture, I To be honest, I really don't do this very often. In this picture, however, I feel like a darker edges would actually kind of complement it. So if we do 8, because that's just going to kind of bring the edges of corners out a little more, especially of the upper edges where you can see these clouds. I feel like that's just going to add a little more detail up there. So once this is all said and done, you can all you're going to do is tap on the photo like that, and then you're just going to see the original and it's going to hop back to the edited. So we do this a few times and just kind of look over everything. That's something I'm pretty happy with. That actually turned out pretty well. I'm very impressed. This is something that it just always impresses me how well iPhone you actually are able to edit on this thing. So you can actually edit pretty well on an iPhone. Of course, I still always will prefer Lightroom because Lightroom just gives you more options. It's the same thing, just with a lot more options and a lot more into depth detail on these pieces. But for what we have, this looks pretty good. I'm enjoying this, and I think that will be the finished product. And there we go. We have the first photo done. Now, as you can see, we have a collection of photos in here. Let's hop into this next one over here. Edit this one. Okay. So this one I'm going to go a little quicker on, just kind of show you what I think needs to happen in this photo. As far as, let's see here, what do we want to focus on here? I want to see what the clouds come out to be on this one. Because in here, in the last one you saw, we didn't have much play with clouds. And here we're going to be able to play with the clouds a little bit more. So first thing we're going to hop into is exposure. So iPhone did a pretty good job of exposing here. We're just going to bring down to -5. Brilliance, we're going to up that to maybe a 20. Highlights. This is the one we want to pay attention to, especially with these clouds that we have in here. Bring it down too much, the clouds are going to look way blue. Let's bring it down to maybe 25. So you can already see the clouds are getting a lot more darker, a lot more detailed. That's good. So for shadows, we're going to bring down shadows to a 15, maybe 16. That sounds good. Contrast. We're not going to mess with contrast too much in this one. This one's pretty good. So just a 10. Brightness, however, I feel like brightness can be brought down in this photo to -10. Black point. So this is a rare case where I actually would suggest increasing the black point a little bit. Not too much, because then you get this faded look. And you don't really necessarily want this kind of white sheet look over your photo. But we don't want to darken it, because then we see how really all the big shadows in this picture, and they're just going to pop out way too much. And I mean, obviously you can see we're losing lots of detail here. We're going to lose a ton here. So let's bring that down to like a -10, because then we're actually going to save a little bit over here on this tree, as well as this tree over here. We're going to save some detail on those two, which is what we want. That's pretty good. Saturation. This is what's going to save the photo after doing something like that, is upping that to 16. Vibrance can go up to maybe a 20. There we go. Now we're getting a lot more color into the play, and it's looking a lot more detailed. It's just going to look a lot better right now. Okay, warmth on this one. This one I feel like we can bring down to negative. Actually, let's bring it up on this one. So the reason I'm going to say let's bring it up is so that it takes out some of that blue in the sky right now. If we were to take it down, that sky is going to look pretty blue. If we took it all the way down, man, that sky is really blue. If we up that, though, the sky is going to look a lot more natural. Those clouds are going to look more white. It's going to be more wispy up there in the clouds. It looks, honestly, a lot better, a lot more pleasing, rather than having a very blue sky and very blue clouds. That's something you want to avoid. Coming over to the tint. The tint is where we can, once again, kind of save the detail down here is going -5. Now sharpness, something we're not touching. Definition. Let's see here. Definition, we're just going to bring that up to like a 16. And then let's actually do a -10 right here. And that's just going to kind of, it's going to bring kind of a white halo up there at the top where we can kind of see those clouds once again just kind of come into play, and it kind of looks like it's fading into it. It looks really good to me. I enjoy that. That's something to remember. All this editing is personal. I'm just showing you guys what these tools do and how they're going to affect your photo. In the end, it's up to you how you're using these. Just do your best with them. Do what you feel is going to complement your pictures the best. So now that we finished that, we have 4 more to go. Now the next one, let's do, okay, so let's do this one right now real quick. Edit. Okay, so this one's once again gonna kind of got more clouds. It's gonna have more formation up there in the sky. So that's something we're gonna need to watch for as we're editing this photo. Another thing to watch for in this picture is you see this massive shadow up here in the foreground. That's something that we're also going to kind of have to watch, is we have these contrasting shadows over here. So we have a little, like a very nice bright area, then we have a very shadowy foreground. So let's see how we can incorporate those together. First of all, exposure. We bring down exposure, we bring it up. In this case, we're going to bring exposure up to an 8. And then brilliance is going to go up to a 18. Highlights are going to go down to a 25. Okay, now the shadows. In this case, so obviously this is what happens when you increase the shadows way too much. This is what happens when you decrease them way too much. In this case, let's take that shadow into play and let's make it a little more visible. Take it down to a -15. Because if we do that, we're going to get a lot more color and detail out of this branch right here, or tree, whatever is growing out of this area. And then also this green grass down here and over here in the picture. We're going to get a lot more color out of those later. Contrast, let's up the contrast to a 20. Brightness. Okay, we're going to take brightness down to a -8. Black point. Let's go. I'm going to decrease black point to a -8. I feel like that's going to be best for the photo to complement it, especially with this tree right here. We don't want to increase it because if we do, we're going to lose that detail there. Now, saturation. Let's go 22 on saturation. Okay, vibrance. So that's an over, let's see here. Let's do 18 on vibrance. I feel like that's going to, yeah, we'll do an 18, and then when we hit in warmth, we're going to up warmth to 17 or 16. Because in vibrance, because we upped it a little much, is it's going to kind of create these yellows and like these yellows and reds and oranges that we have over here. It's going to kind of make them look a little more blue. So when we up the warmth, it's going to help dial that down and make them look, once again, more yellow, red, and orange. Now the tint. Once again, let's help it out a little bit. Let's increase the tint to like a 9 or a 10. Okay, sharpness, skip over that. Definition. Only go up to about a 16 on this definition. That's pretty well done. And then, do you want it to look more dark on the edges or light? Let's go a little more dark on the edges to like an 8 because we do have that shadow. And if we go positive light on here, we're going to get like this white halo around the bottom. It's just kind of look a little weird because you have this massive shadow, but then you got some white edges sticking out, which doesn't really fit. Whereas these darker edges is going to increase the darkness at the top and the bottom, and that's just going to look a little more natural to the eye than having white sitting there. Then we're going to go to original and then edited. And once again, that looks pretty good to me. I personally like that. That sounds good to me. Afterwards, if you guys want to mess with it how you want to. Now, the next thing we're going to go into is a landscape photo. Hit edit. Okay. Exposure on this one is going to be brought down to a -10. This one we're just going to kind of do the same settings as the last one. So this one's going to go pretty quickly. Increase the contrast, brightness, and this one we're just going to decrease it. Because in this one, there is a difference between this one and the other, which is we are getting a lot more shadow in this one. So by this time, the sun moved in a different area and the shadow has increased to that entire section of red, yellow, and orange leaves. So we have to account for that. And the shadows, let's actually increase. So this is something I don't typically do. I usually never go over 30 to 40 when I'm editing. I never go over on either side. So I usually like to keep a buffer in between those two. In this case, we're going to do shadows and we're going to go to a 58, just so that we can actually have a lot more brightness up here in this landscape area. That brightness is going to actually be brought down so that we can keep the saturation in when we go into the colors. So black point's actually something that can be increased in this one to an 8. And saturation, we can kind of bring that up to maybe a 27. Vibrance can go up to a 12. Now warmth this is the one that's going to require some warmth. See this, if you take it down to a more cool setting, it's going to look a lot more blue overall. Whereas you bring it up to like a 10 and warm, you're going to get a bunch of different colors varying from the yellow, the red, the orange to the blue sky at the top. We don't want to have an entire blue looking folder. Photo. Because if we bring it down to here, it's just going to kind of look like it's got a big blue screen on it. If we bring it up to here, it's got a lot more color, a lot more separation to those colors. That's what we want to see in a picture. We don't want to all blend together into a blue. We want to see it just separate all the colors so that you can focus on different pieces as they are, not all as blue, if that makes any sense. Tinting. Let's see here. Let's tint this one a little higher this time. Let's go to 20 on the positive end, because then we're going to see a lot more red be brought into this. So we go to a good old 20 up there. We're going to see a lot more red detail in these. If you can watch that as we do that, you can kind of see these red areas, sections pop a little bit more. That's kind of what we want in this picture. Now that we see that, it's going to add a little subtle detail that you can appreciate when you're looking back later. Sharpness, skip over that. Definition, definitely add a little bit there, maybe 14. Noise reduction, doesn't look like we need it. Now in this picture, we can kind of go for, this white is looking a lot more natural to me. So let's go for a -4. That's gonna make these edges pop a little bit more, especially over here. If you can see that get added there, that's gonna help quite a bit. That looks pretty good. I like that. And then before, after. So in this one, we can actually see quite a major shift. And that is because certain photos, you're going to see a more major shift happen in them. depending on how you tweak and edit them. In this one, it just so happens we're going to see a lot more major of a shift because maybe the iPhone settings, they didn't get it exactly to how we wanted it. So we went afterwards and we edited it to what we want it to look like. However, the other ones that you don't see such a big major difference in, it means the iPhone did a pretty good job at capturing the detail and imagery that you wanted. You just needed to increase a little or enhance a little bit of that picture itself. However, in these ones that look a lot more finished, when you're finished with it, like when you're actually editing them and you finish it and it'll look something like this with the different details and different contrast comparisons, it's just going to look overall a lot better because it's you, this is what you added to it, and it's not what the camera just assumed you wanted. So that I'm actually pretty happy with. I think that was a really good edit. Okay, now that we've done those, there's two more that we have. These two waterfall pictures. The first one is this. Now this is going to get a little more major as we have that big piece of like bright, I don't even know what that was. I believe that's the sun reflecting off clouds. And in this picture, when I was taking it, I wish I brought down the exposure before snapping the shot, because it's a lot harder to bring in the detail of the clouds after something like this happens. So we're going to do our best to save this picture. And this is what I'm going to be showing you guys how to do right now, is saving a picture that maybe you didn't capture it quite how you wanted to. So we hop into this. The first thing we're going to do is decrease exposure. Okay, we're not even going to save any detail up there, is what I'm realizing as we start editing. So, but to avoid having that happen, it's going to be good to edit it. So let's edit down to a -6. Brilliance is going to go up to a 22. Highlights go down. That's going to help kind of save that area right there. So the more we bring those highlights down, the more it's going to save the clouds next to it. So we got -36 there. Shadows. Okay, let's go back to the whole picture. Shadows, we're going to want to increase the shadows. This one we're going to go up to a 46. Once again, it's not something I usually recommend in this picture, however, because we have this little spot that kind of messed everything up. We're going to have to go a little more crazy with some of these settings, like the shadows. Contrast is something that can just go to like a 20. Now brightness, this is going to be a difficult one to determine. Let's do a negative. Okay, actually, let's bring that up to 10. That looks pretty good. Okay, the black point's going to save us in saturation, so let's bring black point up to 15. Saturation now, let's bring that up to 15. Vibrance, let's do an 8 for vibrance. Okay, warmth is something that's just going to separate some of these colors, so let's do like a 26. Okay, once again, so now we get into tinting again. So as you start tinting a lot, you're going to notice these rock colors change a little bit. And once again, the trees. So in this one, we're going to tint it up to a 50 because I like the way that rock looks. It actually looks pretty cool to me, and it's a different color than everything else. It pops a little bit. Same with these red leaves up here, is they're going to pop a little bit more now that we've done that, and it's not going to overall look green like it did before. If we go back down to 0, it's going to look a lot more green in this picture. The entire picture looks green, including the rocks and the yellow leaves and orange leaves that we have up here. However, once we start adding this tint, we're going to see it look a lot more red, orange, and then these rocks are going to kind of turn a little bit more, kind of looks a little more reddish. I kind of like that look for it. So far, this is what we've got so far. Now, sharpness, something once again we don't mess with. Definition, we'll just take that up to 15 as well. Noise reduction is not something we need to worry about. even with this happening on over here, I mean, you could tend to add a noise reduction into there, and you're going to see it kind of blurs that up, and it just kind of makes it look a little more natural, which is fine, I guess, if we want to up that. And then what we could do with this, let's do a 7. I actually think that looks pretty good for that. Okay, so here we go. This is an attempt to save a picture. It looked like that, and now it looks like this. What we did is we really just brought out the colors. We focused the detail more on the waterfall, more on the trees, more on the rocks, more on the leaves up here, versus focusing on this huge spot right here. Before, that was kind of a heavy focus of the picture. Now it's kind of shifted back over to your foreground and the waterfall, everything going on other than the sky. So I do like this picture still. I'm still really disappointed about the sky, but that was my fault when I was taking the picture. And that is something that you just kind of learn as you're taking pictures, and it's going to be something that's part of the class I have coming up. So keep an eye out for that. But overall, just try to avoid getting something like that. But other than that, there we go. We saved this picture, and I really enjoyed the look. Next thing is this picture of a different angle, different view from the waterfall. Now, if we edit this, already it's kind of looking, I don't know, let's see. Let's hop into editing and just see what we can do with it. So personally, I do, if you haven't noticed already, personally, I like photos a little more dark. I feel like it adds that saturation and detail in that having a more bright photo doesn't do. However, that's personal preference. That's just me enjoying a dark photo. It's honestly up to you guys, what you prefer, but this is going to help you angle that a little bit more. So let's, with this picture, for those of you who do like more bright photos, let's try to go a little more bright. So already what we're going to do is we're going to add more brilliance to this. The exposure is going to go down a little bit to save detail. Highlights are going to go down. That's going to save detail up there in the sky, and it's going to start bringing out some of these colors earlier. So let's do -24. Now, because we're going to go for a little more bright of a photo, we're going to add shadows. We're going to add that up. I'm going to add it. We're going to kind of take away the shadows. So we're going to go up in here. We're going to go up to 30. And already we're seeing these rocks over here pop out a little bit more. Contrast, we're going to up that by, let's do 18. That looks pretty good without taking away too much. The brightness, okay, 15. Black point. So this is where I like to get a little fun with the black point, is if you increase it quite a bit, like until 34, this rock is going to look a lot more detailed because it is more of a black surface. This is where you can get a lot more detail if you up the black point. Saturation. Let's take that to 22. Vibrance. Let's do 12. So as you can already see in the background over here, these colors aren't changing very much. These are the colors we're not really focusing on right now. If we did want those to change and be more saturated and be more vibrant, we could, but this is all going to look overdone if we do that. As we want in this picture, we're kind of focusing on the foreground. We're focusing on the rock, we're focusing on the moss, on the waterfall, and everything in the background is just kind of adding a sense of location. It's just going to add a little bit more to the picture. It's not something we actually need to focus on. What we do want to focus on is this foreground though. So we're going to go into warmth now. This is going to be a more warm photo. So let's up that by 25. Then tinting it, we're going to do a 10. Sharpness, once again, don't mess with sharpness, definition. It's way too much definition. So let's just do like a 12, I think. And then there you have it. We can also do this real quick. Let's bring that down to like a 5. Okay, well, up to a 5. Okay, so now that we did that, original, afterwards, original, afterwards. Once again, this is something I really enjoyed. I love this picture, especially with this foreground being brought into a lot more play. Afterwards, you can kind of see how before it all kind of looked flat. Now you kind of see the separation between like over here on the rock and then in the background where you have the trees and everything. You kind of now feel a little more depth. If you go to before, it kind of looked flat. Now it kind of looks in depth in a field of view. It feels like you're looking into the actual photo, into the area. So we say done. So there we go. We got 6 pictures edited. This is the way that I like to edit them, the way I like to make them look. So if we actually go back into one, and I'm going to show you why we don't just hit auto, because it does that. You can see that it brought out a lot of saturation. It brought out a lot of color. In fact, I almost prefer the unedited look to the edited. And if we cancel discard changes, then again, that's going to look a lot better. We're just taking the best of both worlds. It's making it, the auto feature is going to make it brighter. However, it's going to take out the saturation, the colors that we like. However, if we go into editing ourselves, we can bring the brightness in ourselves. We can brighten up just enough to where we like it, where it's not ruining the picture, where it's not taking away from the detail and the colors. And then we can also increase the colors to where it's not overly done, overly processed, or where they're just non-existent at all when you just hit auto and it just does its own thing. It just overall looks a lot better. Anyway, so that is editing pictures on your iPhone. I hope you guys found this interesting. I hope this helps you. And certainly this is something that took me some time to gain skill. Let's do this real quick. Okay, overall, this took me a lot of time to master. When I started out in the very beginning, all my pictures were just overly done. They were overly saturated, overly brightened up. It just did not look to its premium, to the best it could be. I later went back and now using what I know now, I looked back and I re-edited those photos in Lightroom, and I saw what a difference I could make just by actually knowing how to edit these pictures. I hope you guys enjoyed this and that it helped you a lot. I sure know that it's better than hitting an auto button and seeing what your iPhone does. And I also know it's a lot better than just going into Instagram and uploading it and then using those filters, or whatever platform you use, Facebook, Instagram, any of those. It's just a whole lot better than just uploading there and seeing how they can generally edit your photo. Now, that is all I have prepared for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you.